So I once asked the DJ to play a song. I don't remember what song it was, but he explained to me that professional DJs have a plan, and it's offensive to ask them to play a song. So I kept it in mind. I thought it was a little bit strange, but I don't mind special requests. So I think it was Lenora last week who asked the question, and so this class is dedicated to answering that question. Our Torah portion continues with the construction and preparation of the tabernacle. The tabernacle was to be God's home on earth. As it is stated, "V'asu li mikdash v'shechanti b'tocham," build for me a holy place so that I may dwell within them. And there's a lot of commentary on why it says within them and not within it. But that's for another time. Throughout the Torah, we encounter different names and descriptions of God, such as Shekhinah, which is for the presence of God, for example, in the tabernacle. V'asu li mikdash v'shechanti Shekhinah b'tocham. Some other examples include Elohim, Adonai, El Shaddai, Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, and many more. Jerry, we're honored to have you on a time when you usually play tennis. All right, so how did I rationalize teaching about this during a Parsha class? Because as I was preparing in general, just trying to figure out what to talk about, I ran into the word Tzv'ot in this week's Parsha. It wasn't actually in the Parsha, it was in the Rashi. So here's the Rashi. It's talking about the copper wash basin that was to be sculpted, created in the tabernacle. Does somebody want to read it?
I'll read it.
Thanks, Shelley.
Could you step back 1 second and say who Rashi was, Rabbi?
Absolutely. So Rashi was a commentator in, I'm not sure exactly the year, but maybe 1200s, 1300s. In France. And he is considered the most, certainly he wrote the most, died 1105. Okay, so a little earlier in Troyes, France. But a preeminent commentator on not just Torah, but on Mishnah, on Talmud. Generally, any Jewish printing you have of these texts will include Rashi. It might include some other commentators as well, but Rashi is always included.
So the Israelitish woman possessed mirrors of copper into which they used to look when they adorned themselves. Even these did they not hesitate to bring as a contribution toward the tabernacle. Now Moses was about to reject them, since they were made to pander to their vanity. But the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, accept them. These are dearer to me than all the other contributions, because through them the women reared those huge hosts in Egypt.
All right, so that covers it, right? So when it says those huge hosts, it says Tzv'ot, wherever it is here. Hamidu Hanashim Tzv'ot Rabot Mitzrayim. Yeah, exactly. So Lenora, were you the one who asked the question originally about Adonai Tzv'ot, or was it somebody else?
No, it was me. Yeah, I just wanted what it meant. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you were asking.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm assuming you were asking it because we say it in the Ma'ariv service.
Yes.
So we're reading the English, and all of a sudden, there's this word, Hashem Adonai Tzv'ot, and the obvious question is, if it's translated, why are we using a Hebrew word? And the answer to me is because this isn't to translate it.
Because I'm sorry.
They were reluctant to translate it. Sometimes when there's a term that's not completely clear what it is, they just use the Hebrew term instead of going with the translation. But as you'll see, there's different translations that are used. Oops. All right, we can bring it back. So Sandy, just to bring you up to speed, the class is about Adonai Tzv'ot, what it means. This is the Rashi. Okay. So granted, the actual term originally asked about Adonai Tzv'ot isn't in this week's Parsha. Nevertheless, this Parsha is as good as any other week because the term Adonai Tzv'ot does not appear in the first 5 books of Moses at all, and thus it isn't in any Parsha. So if we're going to talk about it, at least we found one of the words. The word Tzva'ot alone is found in the first 5 books, but not the term Adonai Tzva'ot. The Talmud in Shavuot references one such example. Rabbi Yossi says, the word Tzva'ot may be erased in its entirety. So this is a conversation in the Talmud about the sacredness. For example, if you write God's name on a piece of paper, are you allowed to destroy it? Right, and this is where the practice of writing, instead of writing God, writing G-D that you may have seen, and that practice comes from because of this discussion about certain names of God are not allowed to be destroyed. And so the question is, what about the word Tzva'ot? And basically, the question is that the name of God, or is that an attribute that's being added on? And so that's not really the name of God, in which case it could be destroyed. And in terms of electronic media, as you can see here, God is written out clearly. The general consensus is most things are not being printed out and won't be destroyed, so don't worry about it. So Rabbi Yossi says, the word Tzva'ot may be erased in its entirety, as God is called Tzva'ot only in the context of the children of Israel, and it is not an independent name of God, right? This is not he's not entirely correct, in my opinion, that it's only used for the name of Israel, and I'll show you why I say that. It's also used for angels. It's also used for other things. But he's arguing that the part Tzva'ot is not part of the name. It's just an adjective. And I shall bring forth my host, Tzva'ot. He's giving an example. My people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt. In that case, the hosts are the people of Israel. The word Tzva'ot is often translated as hosts. So Lord of hosts is the most common translation. However, as can be seen from the sampling of verses below, it is also translated as armies, troops, ranks. And in the context we just read, it's referring to the Jewish people. Tzeva is the word for an army in modern Hebrew. Right? Tzva'ot, where am I? Is part of the Hebrew name for the Israeli Defense Force, Tzava Haganah Yisrael, right? The word host can bring to mind a gracious giving God, right? If we translate it as Lord of Hosts, while the words army, troop, and rank have a military ring to them and can conjure up images of a God to be feared. Right, and so if we're using this as a way of an adjective for God, then it's a pretty vague term to use because it seems to mean different things.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Could it also be used to infer that God is leading us and will protect us?
Absolutely. And that's where it's often used in the army sense. That's where that translation comes in. Looking at different verses in which it is used can help us have a better understanding of the word. Whether it's a Jewish people, as we mentioned before, it's also used to refer to the angels in heaven. And growing up, the youth group for Chabad is known as Tzv'ot Hashem. That same word, just reversing it. Instead of Adonai Tzv'ot, in English it's Tzv'ot Adonai. Tzv'ot Hashem, the army of God, was the translation. Right? And so we were supposed to be the army of God, and thus bringing the Jewish people back to the faith. Which is another interesting use of it.
Yeah. Rabbi?
Yes.
Were those the young people in that youth group, were they the people who would stop you, they would ask you at the ferry if you're Jewish, if you want to lay tefillin, that sort of thing? Did they go out into the community like that?
Yes. I mean, it's not entirely, basically as far as Chabad is concerned, all youth are part of Tzv'ot Hashem, and they encourage people to sign up, and they might send you a little membership card, but they didn't exclude you. If you wanted to go do missionary kind of type work, they're not going to check your card and say, you're not part of the youth group, so you can't go on Mitzvayim and, go on the mitzvah tank or whatever, right? All right. So a couple of examples of where tziva'ot is used on its own in the Torah. And, we're finishing the book of Shemot, of Exodus. In English, it's known as Exodus. In Hebrew, it's known as Shemot, which is actually names. But that's a whole other story. So I thought I'd bring a couple of examples from here. So one example from chapter 6. It is the same Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring forth the Israelites from the land of Egypt, troop by troop. Al tziv'otam. So tziv'otam is plural. Tziva'ot, tziv'otam. It's possessive, plural. And in that context, there's kind of a list of genealogy, and it mentions Moses and Aaron. So it's saying specifically it's that Moses and Aaron, just in case you were wondering. Another example, Vayhi Miketz Shloshim Shana, at the end of the 430th year, to the very day, all the ranks, so over here it's being translated as ranks, of the Lord departed from the land of Egypt. Right, so clearly here, Tziva'ot is referring to the Jewish people, or as they were known then, the Israelites. I found a fascinating paper that actually isn't written directly towards this question. It's written in a much larger context of what seeming to try arguing against the documentary hypothesis of the Torah, and more particularly against the dating of the Torah. So some people say that significant parts of the Torah were only written after the first exile or the second exile or whatever it was. And he goes into great detail showing, trying to prove that that's not the case based on, among other things, the usage of different names of God, including Adonai Tzv'ot. He found that it's, or I'll just read it. Actually, does somebody want to read it? Just to be a little more engaging. All right, I'll read. The name Tzv'ot, used as an appellation of God, is one of the most striking characteristics of biblical language. It is used 285 times in the Bible. Again, not the first 5 books. And when he says Bible here, I'm assuming he means the Hebrew Bible and not the New Testament, but he doesn't say so explicitly. Usually in the phrase YHWH, which is meant to represent Yud Hey Vav Hey, Tzv'ot, translated as the Lord of Hosts, and about 20 times in the phrase Yud Hey Vav Hey Elohei Tzv'ot. Yud Hey Vav Hey Tzv'ot serves as an appellation of the God of Israel in the book of Samuel, and as you'll see later, both Samuel 1 and Samuel 2 in Kings, Psalms, as well as most of the prophets used it frequently, except for Ezekiel, Joel, Obadiah, and Jonah. From the beginning of the period of prophecy until Malachi, which is the last one, I believe. Yeah, the last of the prophets. The phrase Yud Hey Vav Hey Tzva'ot is prototypical in prophecies, prayers, and every religious saying of the heroes of the Bible, as well as the narrator. So it's a significant, 285 times is a lot of times.
Rabbi, what does the word appellation mean?
So I think it's
Appellation is a name.
It's what?
Name.
Name?
like naming something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a fancy way of saying, right? I mean, if one could say, somebody's born and they're given the name before they've shown any of their characteristics, right? And so the name doesn't necessarily reflect who they are or what they are. However you say that word.
Appellation.
Appellation. I had to look it up myself, to be honest. I understand it as it's a name that's supposed to reflect what something is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And in Judaism in general, there's all kinds of Kabbalistic meaning to names that it's supposed to reflect not just a random, like our daughter's second name is Dora really loves the flower iris. So we named her Iris. Is she going to be an iris? I can't tell you. But the first one had much more significance. Anyway, it's another story. All right. According to Shemot Rabbah, God is referred to Tzv'ot when he is waging war against the wicked. However, as you can see from the examples below, that does not always seem to be the case. So I'm not sure how Shemot Rabbah reconciles that, but I just thought it was an interesting go. Can I get a reader? I don't know if we'll read the whole thing, since the main part of what I want is at the beginning, but we'll do a little bit.
I'll read a little bit.
Thanks, Ruth.
Forgive us, we may have to leave early. Our daughter and granddaughter are coming.
You are forgiven.
Thank you. And God said to Moses, Ravaba, what's the
Bar or Ben.
Mamel said, God said to Moses, you wish to know my name. I am called according to my deeds. Sometimes I am called El Shaddai, Tzv'ot, Elohim, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. When I judge the creations, I am called Elohim.
Right.
When
just 1 second. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So the beginning, in the creation story, and in the beginning, we see a lot of Elohim. We don't see the Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, and a big part of what the documentary hypothesis is based on is saying that one author referred to God as Elohim, another author referred to God as Adonai, or Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, And so that's how we know which one comes from which author. Anyway, that's another story.
When I judge the creations, I'm called Elohim. When I am waging war against the wicked, I am called Tzv'ot, the Lord of hosts. When I suspend punishment for a man's sins, I am called El Shaddai, Almighty God. When I am merciful towards my world, I am called Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, but that only refers to the attribute of mercy. As it is said, the Lord, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, God, merciful and gracious. Hence, I can only read Hebrew, I can't read transliteration. Eyeh asher eyeh, I am that I am, or I will be that I will be. I am called according to my deeds. Rabbi Yitzchak said, God said to Moses, tell them that I am who was, that I am now, and that I will be in the future. For this reason, the word, is that supposed to be?
Yeah.
Eheyeh?
Yeah.
Eheyeh is written 3 times. Another explanation of Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh, Rabbi Jacob ben Rav Abina is the name of There's too many rabbis. In the name of Rav Huna of Tzipori, God said to Moses, tell them, in this servitude I will be with them, and in the continuing servitude I will be with them.
All right, we'll skip the rest for now. But yeah, that's in this week's parsha, last week's parsha, I can't remember at the moment, but where, Moses going up on the mountain and, actually that's earlier. That's where God tells Moses to go and tell the Pharaoh to let the people go and go to the people and tell them, I'm gonna get you out of here. And Moses says, who should I tell them is going to save them? How do I refer to you? Right? But the main reason I brought this was because he says, when I am waging war against the wicked, I am called Tzv'ot. So basically, the name Tzv'ot is a reflection of when God is waging war. But I found multiple texts that seem to be not a whole lot of war going on. Anyway, let's see. The first mention of the term Adonai Tzv'ot is the following. It's in the book of Samuel. So for those not familiar, just to review, so the Torah is the first 5 books of Moses, but the Hebrew Bible, and the term Torah is used much more broadly, but the Hebrew Bible, basically the written Torah, also includes a bunch of books of the prophets and the writings. And the time that most people, most Jews at least, engage with these is when reading or studying a Haftorah, because a lot of them are from there. So the book of Samuel was the first prophet, and we find him using this name. So in Shmuel Aleph, Samuel 1, because the book of Samuel is divided into 2, first chapter, 3rd verse, we already have it. This man used to go up from his town every year to worship and to offer sacrifices to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh. Chophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord there. So this is the story of Hannah, who was barren. She couldn't have children. And she went to the temple to pray. And the priest saw her praying fervently. He thought she was drunk. He scolded her. She defended herself, and then he basically apologized, blessed her, and she had a son who was Samuel the prophet. The story is much bigger than that, but that's the general story. The Talmud in Brachot Brachot, as Shelley can tell you, is one of the most popular books in the Talmud. Many people start with that one, although others start with Bava Metzia or whatever it is. But it's, I remember my grandfather would spend an enormous amount of time studying this particular tractate of the Talmud. This is where we study about, for example, the silent Amida and other parts of davening. But like any book in the Talmud, it also covers all kinds of other interesting things. Can we get a reader?
I'll read, Rabbi.
Nice.
Incidental to this discussion of Chana's prayer, the Gemara explores related topics. In her prayer, Chana said, and she swore an oath and said, Lord of hosts, Tzv'ot.
So just one second, Jerry. Just so you know, when in this website, when it quotes the Talmud, this Gemara, that's in bold. Everything that's not in bold is commentary helping give it context. But it's important to know what's actually the words from the Talmud as opposed to the author of this particular translation.
But you have to realize it is a translation.
Well, the whole
interpretation.
Exactly. The whole thing is a translation, but then there's also interpretation.
Okay. So, and she swore an oath and said, Lord of hosts, Tzv'ot, if you will indeed look upon the affliction of your maid servant and remember me and not forget your maid servant and will give your maid servant a male child, I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. There shall be no razor come upon his head. That's 1 Samuel 1:11.
Right. And basically, when the Talmud was written, there was an assumption that we all were incredibly knowledgeable. And so it just brings like a verse from a particular story. And the assumption was that we all would immediately know what it's talking about. This author is, working in the modern age, and he's bringing the rest of the story to help us know what it is without us having to go and look it up.
Rabbi Eliezer said, from the day that the Holy One, blessed be he, created his world, there was no person who called the Holy One, blessed be he, Lord of hosts, until Chana came and called him Lord of hosts. This is the first time in the Bible that God is referred to by this name. Rabbi Eliezer explains, is it Alaza, explains that Chana said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe. Are you not the Lord of the hosts, and of all the hosts and the hosts of creations that you created in your world? Is it difficult in your eyes to grant me one son?
This is such a Jewish expression. You can't spare one. Right, but the use of the word Tzva'ot here is interesting. What does she mean by hosts? Is she talking about people? Is she talking about angels? Is she talking about just things? It's not entirely clear, right? But either way, it's saying you can create a lot of stuff. So give me a break here. Another verse from a little further down in that chapter. And she made this vow. Actually, we already read this, so we'll skip it. Okay. Further down in that chapter, David replied to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts. Right? So over here, we see it clearly in the context of a military situation, the God of the ranks of Israel, whom you have defied. I think I brought that one twice. No, maybe I didn't. That's chapter. No, this is a different one. David replied to the Philistine, you come. Never mind. This is from Shmuel Bet. So this is the second. So the book of Samuel, Shmuel, Samuel, same thing. Book of Kings, and maybe another one also that's divided in two. I think it's just Chronicles is also divided in two, but all the rest of the books just have one. Anyway, then David and all the troops that were with him set out from Baalim of Judah to bring up from the ark of God, to which the name was attached, the name Lord of Hosts, enthroned on the cherubim. Right, and I really brought this for one reason, just to see another example in the book of Samuel using the Lord of Hosts. But when reading this verse, I couldn't help being curious. What does it actually mean? Right, so we know that David and the troops are going to get the ark from someplace. Okay, fine, wherever Baalim is. But then it adds, to which the name was attached. Okay, there's a comma here. Of course, in the Torah itself, there's no comma. So even that's an interpretation, right? The name Lord of Hosts enthroned on the cherubim. So is it saying that on the ark it's actually engraved or written that? Don't know, but I did find a commentator on it.
Wait, before you go, cherubim.
Yes.
What is it? Define. I think I know what it means, but could you define it?
Absolutely. So the holiest place in the tabernacle, and then later when they built the temple, in the Holy of Holies, kind of like, lahavdil, if you will, in our modern situation in the synagogue, in the ark, where we keep the Torah scrolls. So there was an ark, and inside were the Ten Commandments, a Torah scroll, probably the broken Ten Commandments as well, the first ones, right? And possibly some other important things. And then on top of it, it had a cover. And then there were these angel-like looking sculptures.
Right.
And they were facing each other, and they had wings, and it's a whole, there's all kinds of commentary and analysis of exactly what it looked like and what it's supposed to represent. But what we're told is that God would communicate to Moses through them. So this was, if Moses wanted to talk to God, instead of just going up to a random hill and shouting out, "Hey, up there, anybody? we need to chat." So now he has a dedicated place where he's supposed to go to get prophecy. All right. The whole thing is fascinating, the whole cherubim, and that could be a class in itself. All right, and maybe we will one day. I've talked about it at different.
Also, there's you could have a class on paintings of the cherubim, because they're all different.
Absolutely.
Artistic interpretations of what that looks like.
Exactly.
That's fascinating too.
Yeah. All right. Deal.
And sculptures too.
Yeah. I might need help with that though.
I have a question. Was the name actually, when it says attached, was it actually inscribed, or was it just dedicated to?
I have the same question. So let's see what the Evan Ezra. I don't know if he completely answers it. I don't remember it, to be honest. All right, the Lord of Hosts, and this is talking about Isaiah. So one of the really cool things about this website that I absolutely love, this Safaria website, which I encourage you guys to get into, is that it takes, in general on the internet, you can be reading something, and then if there's a link, you can click it. So, for example, a thing that we just had, if there's a link there, I can click it and maybe get some more information about it. This takes that to a whole other level. When you click it, I don't know if I can do this on the tablet. No, I can't do it on the tablet. Oh, yeah, I can, actually. It brings basically anything it can find in the Torah, in the commentaries. So Targum means translation, Midrash, Kabbalah, philosophy, Chassidut, modern works, sheets. So anybody can create a sheet. So the thing that we're working off of is a sheet that I created. Now I have a choice to make it public or private. This one I made, basically when I actually finish it, that's half presentable, I make it public. So anybody else who wants to study this now can reference my sheet about it. Web pages. So, just within this website, you can often get the answer to your question without even having to leave the website. So, for example, when I clicked this, I found this this commentary that wasn't even written about the verse in Samuel. It's written about something in Isaiah, but because it mentioned something about it, it pulled it up as well. And I thought it was pertinent, and that's why I brought it. All right. So, Lord of hosts, he is truly the Lord, and the hosts of the universe are his witnesses. Why the name of God is joined in the construct state to Tzv'ot, right? So this really goes directly to the question of Adonai Tzv'ot. Though being a proper noun is explained in the book of Samuel. And so it had that little 45. So I clicked the 45 and it gave me this explanation that I put in parentheses here. So I'm not sure who the author of this parentheses is. I didn't have time to dig further. Read book of Exodus. The word Samuel seems to be a mistake. This is a whole other story, which I'm not particularly happy with because I don't like my name being a mistake. Where it was supposed to be just Shmu and not Shmuel. Ezra observes that the tetragram is proper noun, but although generally proper nouns in Hebrew cannot be joined to a genitive, I have to look that one up too. Does anybody know what a genitive is? So it's a linguistic term that basically, normally you don't put two nouns together. You might put an adjective that's explaining what the noun is, but sometimes you're allowed to. Adonai Tzv'ot they're both considered nouns, but it also is modifying and describing the Adonai.
Rabbi, I also was puzzled by this thing, construct state.
Yeah.
So I looked it up, and evidently in Hebrew, you could put two nouns together, like Beis Sefer, to create something. So that's Adonai Tzv'ot is a construct state.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But then they threw in a fancy word for saying the same thing. All right. There are a few exceptions of where you are allowed to do it, and the connection of the name of God with the genitive of Tzv'ot is one of them. This exception is justified because he is not only the absolute being, but also the creator and ruler of the universe. The name of God may therefore be considered an identical with the common noun ruler. So I'm assuming that means Elohim, and be followed by a genitive. It is, however, possible that the words... All right, so that's it. Okay. So moving along, other examples of Adonai Tzv'ot, and this is where I kind of ran into the problem of seeing it in context other than just the military senses. So this is from the book of Kings, Malachim. He replied, I am moved by zeal for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life. So there is some military type language here. You hear sword, for example. So I'm not sure who the prophet is in this one that's saying this, but just an example in the book of Kings. In the book of Isaiah, we see it more frequently. I brought some examples. Instead, there was rejoicing and merriment, killing of cattle and slaughter of sheep, eating of meat and drinking of wine. Eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Then the Lord of hosts revealed himself to my ears. This iniquity shall never be forgiven you until you die, said the Lord God of hosts. That whatever the context of that was, there's no forgiveness. Interestingly, when you click it, you find Maimonides says, yeah, but there is forgiveness. It's just a lot harder. All right. Isaiah, another one. Thus said the Lord, the King of Israel, their Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. I am the first, I am the last, and there is no God but me. All right. Sounds a lot like a term that you hear a lot of Christians quoting. From the book of Jeremiah, thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, mend your ways and your actions, and I will let you dwell in this place. Also from Jeremiah, oh boy, here's a long one. Somebody want to read this one?
I guess I should try.
Go for it. Thank you.
I also spoke to King Zedekiah of Judah in just the same way. Put your necks under the yoke of the king of Babylon. Serve him and his people and live. Otherwise, you will die together with your people by sword, famine, and pestilence, as the Lord has decreed against any nation that does not serve the king of Babylon. Give no heed to the words of the prophets who say to you, do not serve the king of Babylon, for they prophesy falsely to you. I have not sent them, declares the Lord, and they prophesy falsely in my name, with the result that I will drive you out and you shall perish, together with the together with the prophets who prophesy to you. And to the priests and to all that people I said, thus said the Lord, give no heed to the words of the prophets who prophesy to you. The vessels of the house of the Lord shall shortly be brought back from Babylon, for they prophesy falsely to you. Give them no heed. Serve the king of Babylon and live. Whew. Otherwise, this city shall become a ruin. If they are really prophets, and the word of the Lord is with them, let them intercede with the Lord of hosts, not to let the vessels remaining in the house of the Lord, in the royal palace of Judah and in Jerusalem, go to Babylon. For thus said the Lord of hosts concerning the columns, the tank, the stands, and the rest of the vessels remaining in the city, which King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon did not take when he exiled King Jeconiah, son of help me here. Thank you, of Judah, from Jerusalem to Babylon, with all the nobles of Judah and Jerusalem. For thus said to the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, concerning the vessels remaining in the house of the Lord, in the royal palace of Judah and in Jerusalem.
All right. So there's the Lord of hosts again, Adonai Tzv'ot. One more, a little bit shorter. Not so short. Okay. Yeah, so I brought that one because I thought it was kind of interesting in terms of telling people to listen to the king of Babylon. This was after the first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And people could have said, let's start a revolt. And God is saying, no, actually, there's a plan here. I got this one. You're living under this king. Follow the rules. All right. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to switch, go to the book of Micah. Every man shall sit under his grapevine or fig tree with no one to disturb him, for it was the Lord of hosts who spoke. Right? That doesn't have much of a military feel to it. From the book of Zechariah, the word of the Lord of hosts came to me. Thus said the Lord of hosts, I am very jealous for Zion. Yeah, this one can have a little bit more of a military feel. I am fiercely jealous for her. Thus said the Lord, I have returned to Zion, and I will dwell in Jerusalem. Jerusalem will be called the city of faithfulness and the mount of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. Again, from Zechariah, a shorter one. All who survive of all those nations came up against Jerusalem, shall make a pilgrimage year by year to bow low to the King, Lord of hosts, and to observe the Feast of Booths. And from the book of Haggai, silver is mine and gold is mine, says the Lord of hosts. Malachi, which is the final prophet, I think, yeah. But first I will step forward to contend against you, and I will act as a relentless accuser against those who have no fear of me, who practice sorcery, commit adultery, who swear falsely, who cheat laborers of their hire, and who subvert the cause of the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, said the Lord of hosts. From the book of Psalms. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts, he is the King of glory, Selah. And what Selah means is a whole other thing. All right, so we also use the term in Havdalah. We use it a little, some in our davening. I know we're over time. If anybody needs to go, I understand. I'll try to wrap it up quickly here. So we actually, for those that missed it, we've done a few Havdalah services this year, primarily geared towards the Hebrew school. And this is the text of the beginning of the Havdalah, which a lot of people are less familiar with. Behold, God is my unfailing help. I will trust in God and will not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and song. The Lord is my deliverer. With joy shall ye draw water out of the wells of salvation. The Lord alone is our help. May the Lord bless the Lord's people. Interestingly here, obviously it's the same translator because it's part of the same text. The first time it says Adonai Tzv'ot, he translates it as Lord of the universe. Lord of the universe is with us. The God of Jacob is our protection. And then over here, he doesn't translate it. He just puts Adonai Tzv'ot, the same way we have it in our Siddur. Adonai Tzv'ot, blessed is the one who trusts in you. Help us, Lord, answer us, O King, when we call. This is from the Talmud Brachot, and this is a whole other thing, but I'll just mention it because I think it's fascinating. Similarly, it was taught in a brisa that Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, the high priest, said, once on Yom Kippur I entered the innermost sanctum, the Holy of Holies, to offer incense, and in a vision I saw Akatriel Yah, who and what that is fascinating. The Lord of hosts, one of the names of God expressing his ultimate authority, seated upon a high and exalted throne. And he said to me, Yishmael, my son, bless me. I said to him, the prayer that God prays. May it be your will that your mercy overcomes your anger. And may your mercy prevail over your other attributes. And may you act toward your children with the attribute of mercy, and may you enter before them beyond the letter of the law. So here, it doesn't just say, it could have said, I saw Adonai Tzv'ot. It says, I saw Akatriel Yah, the Adonai Tzv'ot. And I'm going to skip that. Interestingly, according to the translation below, the term is being used for the chief angel. When it says Tziva'ot, Adonai, Adon comes from the word master. So it's used as a replacement for the name that we don't say, the Yud He Vav He. But it can also just mean, depending on the context, it could just be used as master. So according to the translation of this Rabbeinu Bachia, and I highlighted it so we don't have to read the whole thing, where Akatriel, a high-ranking angel, and I read the Hebrew text, and it doesn't actually say that it's an angel, so I'm like, hey, what's up with that? So I found this Sforno that they may have based it on, which, again, is not even on that, but it happens to cross over. Bahaya bracha, a true blessing by God, is when God rejoices in our deeds and actions. Our sages in Brachot 7 illustrate this when they quote a conversation between the high priest, Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, who, while offering incense on Yom Kippur, had a vision of the angel Katriel. Boom, angel. Right? So I just think it's fascinating. Abraham Cohen, I'm not sure who he is. A divine appellation usually explained as a combination of Keter, throne. Okay, that's about the Akatriel. And I also brought... What's that?
Excuse me. Are you saying with God there's a number of angels up there, wherever they are? I mean...
That's exactly what I'm saying. The Catholics didn't make it up.
So we made it up.
Correct. Well, hold on.
So there's
we have
an angel.
How we got it? What's that?
Satan is an angel, and there are other angels, good angels, bad angels, just like good humans.
So think of Passover, and there's a tradition to have a cup in the middle of the table. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Elijah, the cup of Elijah.
Elijah's cup. Who's Elijah?
It's a prophet.
Right. But the prophet died.
Right, and went up to heaven and became an angel.
That's
I don't
what it
know.
seemed like. And apparently when there's a bris, he also comes by. He likes the locks. I don't know.
I know, and we're still waiting for him.
And this idea that he will herald when the Mashiach comes, that he'll come before and tell us that he's coming. Yeah, that's another class about angels. And I also brought, and unfortunately we can't get into it, and it's not that unfortunate because Kabbalah is not my strong point. But, when you're talking about names of God, that's when you start getting into the more mystical. So I brought some sources as well from the Sefer Yetzirah, as well as from Eicha Rabbah that mentions it and really starts breaking it down. It's fascinating stuff. I'm going to post this source sheet on Facebook and on YouTube. So if anybody wants access to it, if you have trouble finding it, then just send me an email and I'll be happy to send it to you as well. Any questions, comments?
No, just when I was reading out loud before, and I couldn't pronounce the yeah, that's the Yud Hey, which is another way of writing. And
No, that's a different one. So Yud Hey is a way of writing Adonai, which Adonai itself is meant to mean Yud Hey Vav Hey. The Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh is another word. Ehyeh is like being. I am who I am. So that's really a separate one. So that's the confusion.
Then there's your Yud. There's so many. Yeah.
Correct. So there's multiple ways of writing that. So sometimes it's just the Yud. Sometimes it's two Yuds. Yud Hey. It's confusing. Especially when you're teaching a kid for bar mitzvah. What's that?
Are they used? I came in a little late, and I think that's what I was reading. They used specifically for different designations of what we're attributing to God. I mean, or
so there are different sources that indicate that, particularly in Chassidut and Kabbalah. But we did see a Medrash Rabbah or Exodus Rabbah, I think it was, that kind of spelled out that the name Adonai Tzv'ot is used in the context of battle, of going against Israel's enemies, although sometimes it seems to be geared towards Israel when Israel is misbehaving as well.
No.
And Elohim is generally kind of judgment. Adonai, the one that has all these different ways of saying it, is generally kindness, chesed, and Rahmanas, God's compassion.
But only loosely.
Exactly, because with each one of these examples, when you dig hard enough, there are examples that make it questionable.
Back to my original question,
Yes.
when we read the term, in that passage, it's referring to the creation, and it doesn't seem in that passage to, from what I see, to be used as far as in the an army sense and hosts of troops and stuff like that. When Hannah was asking for mercy and she was saying God of creation, to me, I don't know, maybe it had more of that kind of connotation.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think of it in that context, in Marav there, as talking about the angels. Or actually, I take that back, talking about the hosts like the planets. Right, because it's talking about, you create light and darkness and move darkness away from light and light away from darkness, that sort of thing. That it's talking about the celestial hosts. Like, I think that's my understanding of that context, which has nothing to do with military. Unless you think the planets are fighting with each other up there, we'll see if the Perseverance gets some pictures. But it is. It's it's fascinating stuff, and when we're davening and we don't have the time to really stop and think about a lot of these things. We're like, what did I just say?
Well, thank you for this, Rabbi. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if anybody else notices like things, just like Jerry pointed out, that they're curious about, I would much rather do classes on things like that than stuff that I pull out of my head and that people are not necessarily that interested in. All right.
I think angels is a great idea.
Okay. You got it.
But maybe also Kabbalah. Maybe you could have the cantors into that. Maybe he could give a lecture or two.
I'll ask him. I think I'm going to ask him to cover for me for next week because Dora wants to have a Pi Day event.
I'm sorry, I have to leave. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Charlie.
What's a Pi Day?
So,
A Chai Day?
No,
it's the Pi Day.
March 14th.
the mathematical symbol.
Oh, pi.
Pi, yeah, Pi.
Pi, Pi. The mathematical
so
symbol.
science people and that's like a Yom Tov. So they bake pies. I guess they're gonna do it
3.14.
virtually. What's that?
3.14.
Exactly.
You have to.
Oh, you're so smart.
The kids in high school, I remember our grandson, he memorized it too. I don't remember what degree.
Yeah.
It goes on for infinitum.
Yeah, but I don't know, he must have.
How far you can remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
But there's a minhag among